Welcome to What is Going for new thought from the edge of Each week on OMTimes flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. My guest today has been variously described as one of the great prophetic voices of our time and the most creative, the most comprehensive, and surely the most challenging religious spiritual teacher in America. A passionate advocate for reinventing education and an activist for gender justice and eco-justice, Matthew Fox is a spiritual theologian, Episcopal priest, and ecumenical mystic who's been an ordained priest since 1967. He's also a prolific author, having written over 40 books, which have been translated into over 40 languages. Matthew Fox joins me now to discuss his latest book, Matthew Fox, Essential Writings on Creation Spirituality, which offers fresh perspectives and approaches to the most vital issues that are facing humanity at this time. Matthew Fox, welcome.
Hello, Sandie. Good to be with you.
Good to see you again, Matthew. Matthew, there are a number of critical moral issues dividing humanity right now. Racism, climate change, religion, terrorism, supremacism, eco-fascism, and a worrying resurgence of authoritarianism, patriarchy, and the growing suppression of women's rights. But in your new book, which is Essential Writings on Creative Spirituality, which contains gems of insights taken from all your books, we're reminded that resolutions to all of these postmodern problems can be found in pre-modern wisdom. So tell me about that.
Well, you're certainly right, Sandie, in naming the challenges that face us, and especially, of course, that of climate change, where we're now literally facing our extinction as a species. And so we have to dig deep and grow up fast. But the science tells us we have 7 years left to change our ways. And this is where I think the mystical traditions of the world, and since I'm a Westerner, I especially focus on the West, but not exclusively, that they're telling us some very basic things. For example, Thomas Berry, the eco-theologian and scientist, tells us that we will not save the earth without a recovery of the sacred. He says that you do not save what you do not love, but also we will not love what we do not consider as sacred. And then he answers the question, well, how do we recover a sense of the sacred when we've lost it? And his answer is recovering the universe, the awareness of the universe and its wonders and its beauty, and how it's been working for us, if you will, for 13.8 billion years. And this new story from science, of course, a new cosmology and a new creation story is terribly important because it unites all people around the globe. Of whatever persuasion, religious tradition or none, the truth is that our species is a result of 13.8 billion years of the universe unfolding and birthing. And this just fills one with awe. And as Rabbi Hesse says, awe is the beginning of wisdom. And what we have to do as a species is move from just knowledge, which is raw power when taken alone, to wisdom. And of course, built into wisdom is the feminine. Wisdom is found in the world. In the Bible, she's feminine, Chokmah in Hebrew and Sophia in Greek, Sapientia in Latin. And in the East, too, over my shoulder here, maybe we can't see it, I have a statue of Kuan Yin, and she's wisdom, too. So the banishment of wisdom, which has taken place the last few hundred years in the West, and in education, has been the banishment of the feminine and vice versa. So bringing balance back is absolutely essential. And again, a lot of pre-modern wisdom had that. For example, the picture right behind me, that's Julian Norwich. And in the 14th century, during the bubonic plague, the most severe pandemic Europe has ever faced, 1 out of 2 people died. She developed very deeply and richly a concept of the motherhood of God. And again, the divine feminine. She was 700 years before feminism. Of course, she was the first woman to write a book in English, but it wasn't published for 300 years, which is a long way to wait for one's first book review, I think. But nevertheless, we're ready for her now. And she has so much to teach about the divine feminine without banishing the healthy masculine. That's another thing, deconstruct patriarchy, because patriarchy is an illusory and false and toxic version of masculinity. It's a philosophy of looking at the world exclusively in terms of competition, our reptilian brains, taking out our mammal brains, which is our capacity, as science teaches us, for mothering and for fathering and for kinship and compassion. The word for compassion in both Hebrew and Arabic comes with the word for womb. So mammals have this special capacity for compassion. And this is what the teaches. It's what Jesus taught. It's what Muhammad teaches. The most common word for adjective for Allah in the Quran is Allah, the compassionate one. So all the spiritual traditions, when you boil them down, are trying to remind us that we're capable of compassion, which is a divine attribute, as Jesus says in Luke 6, be compassionate like your creator in heaven is compassionate. It's bringing heaven and earth together to develop our powers of compassion instead of just our powers of I win, you lose, which is that ancient reptilian brain that's in all of us.
So would you say, I mean, you mentioned about, having suppressing the feminine being a cause of us losing our, our love of the sacred, losing our knowledge of the sacred even. Would you put things like racism in that category as well? Because, I mean, every time we get news of another shooting, and it's usually racially motivated, we have to wonder what is going on in the world. Why is humanity so easily divided?
Exactly, and so easily turned to violence. I mean, look at the Ukraine war. We thought that Europe was done with wars, and here 80 years later, we're seeing it again, and we're seeing it live in our living rooms. The first war ever being live streamed. But you would hope that this might wake us up, finally, how foolish and disastrous war is. And it's not just the people who are dominated, but you see these pictures every day of these apartment buildings that are totally destroyed and everything. I mean, everything humans try to build, such as homes for living in and shelter, is out after 90 days of war. And of course, this awful bombing in Buffalo. But notice again, who is it? A young man, 18-year-old. Doesn't this ring a few bells? What about that fellow in Racine who went charging into the crowd with his ARK-15 or whatever it was? I mean, what's wrong with men? I mean, we have to ask that question. And young men, well, they're so confused. Yeah. And Maladomi Some, who was a fine African spiritual teacher, he died this year, a few months ago, unfortunately. He used to say that a society, a culture without rites of passage for the young people, 3 things are wrong with it. One is the young men are angry. And secondly, he said the adults are confused. And the overall society is in chaos. And I think that is so true. I mean, and of course, the racism, this has been whipped up in the media. You cannot let Rupert Murdoch off the hook. This man is getting rich on it. Yeah. And so capitalism involved in this. When when you just want to make it for money's sake or power for power's sake, and all morality goes out the window. And then we have this fellow named Tucker who's on there. I understand he's given over 400 talks about, and he has a big audience because of Murdoch, about this so-called theory of
the Great Replacement.
Replacement, replacement theory. It's nonsense. And so much of it derives from fear.
Yeah.
Apparently, a great deal of white people are afraid that there's going to be fewer white people in the world. I mean, the world is a big place. Already there are fewer white people in the world. If we don't learn to get along, well, we're in a majority. How will we ever get along when we're in a minority? So I laugh because it's so absurd that we're all from Africa. We're all had an African mother. And that means a black mother, just to remind everybody. And the interesting thing to me is this, that recently we've discovered over 14 cousins of ours, hominids like ourselves, but in Asia, Southeast Asia. They're just beginning to uncover these. Of course, we knew previously about the Neanderthal because they were wandering Europe after all, and that's where white people's ancestors are from. But and then our denizens too, from Siberia and so forth. But now we got 14 more. But the message, and we're going to find more, but the message is this: every one of them is extinct. Homo sapiens, that's us. We're the last ones standing. And what are we doing? We're trying to kill each other, and because we have different color skin. I mean, are you kidding me? Where does hatred come from? Well, I'm writing about this in my daily meditations now, but hatred has a lot to do with envy and, of course, fear. And it's a misuse, obviously, of our powers of caring and of anger, which relate to love, really, that we get angry when something we cherish is threatened. And then, of course, there's this whole other thing of making machine guns available to ordinary citizens, guns that were designed to kill people in war, because our political system is so frozen, and some of it is so indebted to the big cash corporations in the NRA, that politicians aren't making decisions based on what's good for Americans, but on what's good for their bottom line and buying themselves back into office. And of course, we do the same with judges now too. Our judicial system is all wrapped up in big money, dark money.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about evil and creativity, because you've said that evil abounds when humanity's capacity for creativity is the greatest. Are you familiar with the work of Paul Levy, who wrote the Wetiko books?
I am familiar with it, but not real familiar with it. I know about it. Yeah.
Well, he talks about Wetiko, which is a mind virus, and he says that this is what is plaguing our world, and he calls it a psycho-spiritual disease of the soul. And he says the way to combat it is to use the divine gift of our creative imagination in the service of life. And I know that this is something that you speak about, creative imagination a great deal. Do you think, is there such a thing as real evil, or is it that we've just gone astray?
Or is it what?
That we've just gone astray.
Oh, that we've gone astray. Well, I see evil. I wrote a major book on evil, and Deepak Chopra wrote a foreword to it a couple of years ago. And he predicted that the number one spiritual problem in the 21st century will be evil. And what I try to do, because I feel the West has underserved us in teaching us about evil. How many classes have people taken in college or high school about evil? Evil 101, evil 202, and yet it's the headlines on a daily basis. The same is true of creativity. That too is underdeveloped in our educational systems. When there's a budget crunch, out goes art, out goes theater, out goes music, out goes dance classes. So they're related. Thomas Aquinas said one human can do more evil than all the other species put together. It's amazing. And he said that 800 years before Stalin or Hitler or Pol Pot or Putin. How did he know them in the 13th century? Because he respected our incredible intelligence, which is real, and our incredible creativity, which is real. But it's one thing to have intelligence and have creativity, but it's another thing to steer it in the right direction. Because with our creativity, we can now tear down a rainforest in a day that has taken nature and God 10,000 years to give birth to. And you cannot replace a rainforest. Rainforest is a once in a lifetime event. So what I did in my book was I felt, first of all, that religion so oversold sin that people don't want to hear about sin. And the result is we don't have a language to dealing with evil. Now, sin is much smaller than evil, but the key to the relationship came to me from a Lakota teacher, Buck Ghosthorse, a friend of mine and a faculty member of mine. He said to me one day, in our tradition, fear is the door in the heart that lets evil spirits in. Fear is a door in the heart that lets evil spirits in. I think that's really important. And I apply it in my book to all chakras. Our heart is one chakra. But I think what I do is I take the 7 chakras of the East and compare them to the 7 capital sins of the West. Because if sin is misdirected love, which is Aquinas' definition of sin, and it's a Jewish understanding, because the Jewish word for sin is an archery term, means missing the bullseye. Well, what if each of our chakras is a bullseye? It's a source of energy, love. But if it's off center, then what? Then we have a correspondence with the capital sins. Now, I'll give one example. The 7th chakra in our crown head, of course, is culmination of all the Kundalini energy and fire that goes up the spine and so forth. And then when it's healthy, it goes out into the world, this light energy to link up with others, to create community. And not only with other humans who hold light and want to make light happen, but with ancestors and with spirits or angels as well. That's a healthy 7th chakra. But an unhealthy 7th chakra would be envy. Envy recognizes the light in others, but it doesn't want to link up with it and make good things happen. It wants to shoot it down so that it is the last one standing. Again, it's that reptilian brain notion, I win, you lose. So I think this applies, and that's what I do in my study, is I apply it to all the chakras, and I think it gives us new language, and it brings together Eastern and Western wisdom, I think, about how we deal with evil. But if I define evil, I put it 2 ways. One is the traditional language is privation of good. It's the absence of good or the diminishing of good. That's one dimension to evil. But the other, I see it as a force in itself. I think that evil is present in the world. It is a spiritual thing because it does not die. It keeps coming back. Racism, Dr. King and the rights movement took on racism in the 50s and 60s, got a lot done. But here we are, 2022, and 18-year-old white boys are traveling 200 miles to murder 11 or more Black people in Buffalo. What's going on? Well, that evil that we call racism. Now, we don't have to use words like Satan and Beelzebub and Lucifer. We can use words like racism and sexism and militarism and narcissism and these other isms that they have a spiritual dimension because they don't die. They keep coming back. We all have to examine our worlds, inner worlds in our culture, to ask, what can we do about dismantling these energies that are ferocious, energies like envy and fear and hatred that obviously are, what can I say, very attractive to our species. But, if we can't tame that reptilian brain, we're not going to survive as a species. And we have talking about evil now, and the methods we have, the medicine we have for moving beyond it, because we do have medicines. All the spiritual traditions of the world have something to say about greed and about envy and about violence, angst and violence and so forth, and hatred. And we have to kind of shake them down because religion can wander from its spiritual roots and become a thing in itself. And then we lose that spiritual energy that is meant to get us all awake and acting appropriately, you know.
You talk about the survival of humanity depending upon bringing in the feminine and revising the masculine. Bringing in the feminine is one thing. How do you revise the masculine?
Well, I wrote a book about that called what's the name of it? The Hidden Spirituality.
I've seen it, yes.
That's it. 10 metaphors to awaken the sacred masculine. Yes. So my method is to apply these 10 archetypes to men, and of course there's the masculine in every woman too. So it's not only men who are walking around today with the toxic masculine, many women are too. And so we all have to do this examination and move beyond patriarchy. So here are the archetypes that are really important. Are Father Sky. So and we talked about this. The recovery of cosmology today is so exciting and beautiful. And notice, any day now, we're going to be getting pictures from the Webb telescope, this new telescope, of the original light of the universe. I mean, if that can't fill us with wonder and gratitude and awe, what will? And remember, when we humans think of light, we usually think of sun and sunlight. But no, the sun's only 5 billion years old. We're getting to that original light 13 billion years ago that has bathed and birthed all of creation, including our tiny, fragile, but so special planet. So Father Sky is coming alive today. And that is so important. In the modern era, when the feminine was banished, at the same time, we were told that the sky was mechanical and there's nothing living up there. Well, that's utter foolishness in that of today's science. We know a star has been born every 15 seconds. And what's a star? Well, our star, which is medium size, our sun, can hold 1 million Earths. So we're not talking about something tiny being birthed every 15 seconds. We're talking about something awesome. So the Father Sky, then Green Man is a wonderful, powerful archetype because the Green Man is perfect symbol for this time of eco-destruction, because the Green Man stands for the relationship of humans to the vegetative world, to the plant world. And it's often depicted, the Green Man is often depicted with a beard that goes around his head like a wreath. And in it are living things like grapes or birds and so forth. And so it's a celebration of the creativity and the generativity of the masculine. It's an honoring of our relationship to other species, especially to the plant world. The indigenous people say that the plants are the wisest ones on the planet. Why? Because they invented photosynthesis. They learned how to eat them. And if it wasn't for them, of course, we wouldn't be here. No plants, no animals would be here. So we owe so much to the plant world. And then another archetype is the Blue Man, who stands for the our powers of creativity and of healing and of art. And Hildegard of Bingen did a great painting on the Blue Man in all of us. She called it the healing Christ in all of us. And Swami Muktananda, the Hindu saint of the 20th century, had this amazing meditation on the Blue Man that morphed from a pearl. And he says that meditation changed his life forever. He overcame his fear of death. He got in touch with his creativity and his capacity to heal. So hunter-gatherer is an important archetype because 95% of our presence on this earth, that of Homo sapiens, we've been hunter-gatherers. Now, of course, we go shopping instead. But we can ask, where is that energy? What are we choosing to hunt and gather for? You know, what are our values there for? So I think that question brings forth our values. Of course, we want to hunt and gather to save our children and our children's children. And so that energy of hunting and gathering and the courage that it takes and the tribal community that it takes, we should be dedicated to that to save the planet, to take on climate change, you know, whatever the sacrifices we have to make. And hunting gathering was a sacrificial thing. It was a matter of life and death. This is why when our ancestors went out to hunt, they always did these rituals beforehand to get the energy up and the courage up to go out and face the dairy, the tough animals that we were going to encounter and so forth. So we have that energy in us. but we have to untrivialize it. It's not about going shopping or finding our parking places. It is about something more severe and serious, and that is what can we discover and create to turn back climate change. And there are many areas where we are making, some progress in that. One of them, which is never mentioned, is veganism. That there are scientists who have proven that if the whole human race went vegan, in 10 years we would stop climate change and reverse it. It would start going backwards, because we had take all the land that now livestock is using and grow trees instead of livestock. And those trees would save the planet for us. Now you can say, well, that's extreme, but for young people, it's not so extreme. They're still young enough to train their bodies to eat a little differently. But there's a spectrum of vegan. Vegan would do that. Vegetarianism would be a big help. And of course,
Yes.
a lot less meat would be a big help also. So there's a spectrum where we could include that as part of our efforts to change, of course, the way we're doing energy and reinventing stronger batteries so we can hold the sun energy and the wind energy longer, and all the rest that we're working on. But so humanity is not done yet. We've got this creativity, the very imagination that makes us dangerous, also makes us survivable if we really put it to action.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you've mentioned that I want to come back to in a minute after our break. The word values, the word awe, and the word wisdom. So we're going to take a short break now. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and my guest today is radical priest, visionary theologian, prolific author, and founder of the University of Creation Spirituality in California, Matthew Fox. And we're talking about his new book, Matthew Fox, Essential Writings on Creation Spirituality, which shows how pre-modern wisdom can help illuminate and resolve postmodern problems. We'll be back in a few moments. Stay tuned.
OMTimes TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OMTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, OMTimes offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an OMTimes magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on OMTimes TV and broadcasting it across the extensive OMTimes radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. OMTimes. Open yourself to the possibilities.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back. Matthew Fox, you are passionate about reinventing education and bringing awe and creativity back into the classrooms. This is a subject very, very close to my heart. And, when I see what my grandchildren are having to do in school these days, it's no wonder that many kids come out of school angry, resentful, worn out. It takes all of the creativity and awe out of them, not putting it into them. What is the answer to that?
Well, several years ago, I did a pilot project for 2 years with inner city kids, because at that time, 64% of Black boys in America were not graduating from high school. And I asked myself, are they dumb, or is the system dumb, what we call education? is it really dumb? And what we brought in was what I call artist meditation. Of course, it's a public school. We didn't call it that. We just called it creativity. So we had kids making movies, and we had them creating poetry and rap and so forth. And at the end of our program, 100% said they wanted to stay in school. And they all told us that this was their first experience of the fun of learning, if you will. The joy of learning is what really came through. And what I concluded was that the word education means to educe, educerate, to lead from. There's so much wisdom and beauty in these kids. They don't have a chance to bring it forward in school because so much of school is testing and the adult's version of what the right questions are, even saying nothing of what the right answers are. So I was convinced I'd used this practice, what I call artist meditation, with adults in my university for over 40 years. And I saw tremendous results. Because once you ignite the human heart, then people learn. They want to learn. Learning is as natural to us as eating. We want truth. And it's delicious. Thomas Aquinas said the proper objects of the heart are truth and justice. Truth and justice. They're found in the heart, not in the head. And so anyway, I wrote a book on this called The Awe Project. And awe stands for awe, beginning with awe and wonder, you see. And that's what the creative process is, kids making their own movies. But awe also stands for ancestral wisdom education. So I put wisdom right on. And wisdom and awe go together, as Heschel said. Awe is the beginning of wisdom. But awe is how we wake up. That's what a spiritual experience is. Juliana Norberts calls it oneing. She invented that word, O-N-E-I-N-G. Eckhart called it breakthrough, and he invented that word in German, breakthrough. Thomas Aquinas used the word ecstasy, which also I had used before I found that on Aquinas. But all these efforts to name the Satori experience, the experience of breakthrough and the arrival of light or intuition or what have you, the wake up, the enlightenment of our hearts and souls and minds, all of these are efforts to name, the mystical experience, or what Einstein called the intuitive brain. And he said, and I quote, "I abhor American education," unquote. Why did Einstein abhor American education? And he lived on Princeton campus because he says, we've been given two gifts, the gifts of the rational mind and the gift of the intuitive mind. And the former should serve the latter because it's only the intuitive mind that gives us values, he says. But he said we live in a society where we honor the rational mind and ignore the intuitive mind. In other words, we're ignoring values. And another word for intuitive mind that I would use would be mysticism, our mystical mind, our right brain, or our creative mind too. But I figured that out real early when I started teaching programs in spiritual. We couldn't do it on a European model of education, which is so rational in the head. I knew we had to bring the body back. The first person I hired to teach was a dancer who led us in circle dancing. And we would begin every day at the school doing circle dancing from various traditions. There was the Shaker tradition of dances. And of course, there's dances from all traditions. And it was so rich and so wonderful, and for everyone to get their body moving and so forth. And then, of course, art is meditation, whether we do clay or music or dance or drumming and so forth. There's so many ways that we learn besides just from books. And we would balance that. We would have seminars, which of course include books and writing papers and debate and discussion and all that and ideas. But that balance of right and left hemisphere of the brain, it worked. And I tested it for over 45 years with adults. And then, as I say, for several years with inner city kids. Never failed. And it's fun. People want to create. They want to give birth. Many of them have been told, oh, you can't sing when they were children, or you can't draw, or something else. But when you put it in the context of meditation, but it's not about judging a product, but it's about the process itself, interacting with the clay, interacting with the body, and so forth. In that context, all judgment is suspended, and deep things happen, conversions happen. And I thought what you said was so profound. Your own experience with your grandchildren helps to explain the violence of young people. And I know these inner city kids, they told me stories years after they left our program, that our program was a high point of their educational experience. And it was calling on their creativity. And they have so much. I mean, I could tell you a few of the projects they did that are just amazing and fun even to hear about. Like one fellow who was 14, or a freshman, he loved muscle cars. So he did a movie on car converting because we also gave them a series of values we call the 10 C's, because this is a public school, you can't use religious language. So we taught 10 C's: cosmology, ecology, chaos, creativity, community, courage, critical thinking, and so forth. And so he took that cosmology, ecology thing, and he converted, with the help of an uncle who was a mechanic, a car from being gasoline driven to being vegetable driven. So he created a vegetarian car. And at the end of the film, he had a race between the vegetarian car and the gasoline driven car. And you can guess which one won the race, you see. And 10 years later, when he was in his young 20s, he said to me that was a high point of his educational experience, was that one class where he created that movie. There were 5 gay kids in the class, and they made up this thing together. They went around the streets of Oakland, this is in Oakland, with a camera, interviewing strangers and saying, "We're gay, what do you think of that?" That was their movie. And the responses from people, out of the blue on the street. But what I really noticed is how these kids grew in their self-confidence and their energy, and they just grew up in doing that one project. And of course, they had a lot of fun doing it. And why should education not be fun? Why should learning be
it's not even fun for the teachers anymore, because they're restricted in what they can do, and so many are leaving the profession.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I gave a talk once on my education book up in Napa, a woman came up. She said, "I'm a teacher. I love teaching. I'm a wonderful teacher, and I'm quitting. And most of my fellow teachers who are good are quitting, because we're fed up with this whole emphasis on grades and stuff. We know this is not why we became teachers." Just what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you created this alternative education model with Professor Pitto, who's a hip hop, is a rapper and a hip hop video maker. And you've actually got that running in 2 schools, is that correct?
Yes, right. We got it running in Oakland. And then the second year, we had a new director, and he was from Chicago. So he and his wife returned after a year directing our program to Chicago, and he started a movement called the Chicago Wisdom Movement. And now there's a Baltimore Wisdom Movement, and they have a national grant to take that program national. And it does, it's a result, I think, of the program that he and I worked on, and I might say very successfully in our Oakland program. Yeah.
If there was anybody listening who is inspired by that, what would they have to do to get it into their schools?
Well, they could just go to the webpage, Chicago Wisdom Project, called Chicago Wisdom Project. They have a magazine they're putting out that the kids put out with the adults and so forth. And, there'd be all kinds of links on that webpage. Yeah, Chicago Wisdom Project. Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about the word, I'm not sure how to pronounce it because I hadn't come across it before, but it's a word called acedia.
Yes.
Acedia, that you say is the most dominant sin of our culture today. Tell us what acedia is.
Well, that's the capital sin that we usually translate as sloth, but it's much richer than that. That was during the Industrial Revolution that the owners of the industrial plants reduced the sin acedia to sloth, because they felt, before unions, that I might add, that their 14-hour days, 6-day work weeks and so forth, that people were were slothful because they weren't on board with all of that, again, before unions got something, did something about that. But acedia really means energy. Aquinas defines as a lack of energy to begin new things. So it includes depression, it includes despair, it includes boredom, it includes an attitude of, oh, I can't do anything, or I can't fix this, and so forth. It's giving up, really, and it's that lack of energy. Now, Aquinas also gives us the medicine. He says that zeal, and zeal is the opposite of acedia. Zeal is energy. Zeal comes from the intense experience of the beauty of things. That's what Aquinas says. Intense experience of the beauty of things. In other words, we need to fall in love more if we're going to save the earth. We have to fall in love and, again, move beyond our anthropocentrism. Currently, you hear the word fall in love, and you think just about your mate. But no, it's about falling in love with the trees and the wildflowers and the seasons and the soil and the animals and the healthy sky and water and so much more. We can't take it for granted. And especially not now, given our climate change emergency. So that's what acedia is really about then. The opposite is falling in love and connecting to the whole, that we are so interconnected, obviously. Where are humans without clean water? Where are we without healthy air? Where are we without healthy soil and food, et cetera, et cetera? And I mean, we're getting back to the basics now. You know, Howard Thurman, the wonderful American mystic who was really the spiritual genius behind the civil rights movement, he and his wife visited Gandhi in the 30s and brought home the nonviolent practices of Gandhi and so forth. But he used to say that, and he repeated this often, it's very important to him, that sometimes we get stripped to the literal substance of ourselves before God. Stripped to the little substance of ourselves before God. That's what the dark night of the soul is about. And I think as a species today, we're in a collective dark night. We're in the dark night of our species. And, you know, don't be afraid that to stick around and learn what we have to learn, including what we have to undo and what we can do better. There's a wonderful way that Hafiz, the Sufi mystic, put it in the 14th century with a great deal of humor. He said, sometimes God wants to do us a great favor, turn us upside down and shake all the nonsense out. But most everyone I know, when they find God is in such a playful, drunken mood, he says, quickly packs their bags and hightails it out of town. In other words, our first choice is to get out of town when things are really getting bad. But today we can't do that because it's just as hot out of town as it is in town. And there's as much drought, or there's as much hurricanes and flooding over here. So there's no way to run. There's no place to run. So this is going to force us to become mystics overnight, maybe, not to take for granted and stick around. And what is the wisdom we're going to learn from this suffering that we're undergoing? And that's what the mystics teach, that the dark night is a hard place to be, but an important place to be, because it's a school. And you learn things in the dark you don't learn in the light. And two things you surely learn are wisdom and compassion. And compassion towards yourself, not just out there, but it is also a compassion toward ourselves and a realization of how fragile our time is here, not just as individuals, but as a species. And this would give us the courage to overcome this lack of energy to change things that is acedia.
I want to bring up the word values. Essential Writings on Creation Spirituality closes with a letter from you to young seekers about the future. And you tell a story about coming across an article headline in GQ magazine, which was the redemption of Justin Bieber. And it intrigued you, the word redemption. And you said two things. Ultimately, the journalist said two things brought Justin Bieber back from the brink that he was at, and that was marriage and his faith. And what they had in common were the value systems that didn't depend on him performing in exchange for money. We've lost our sense of values. How do we get that back?
Mm-hmm. Well, remember what Einstein said, that our whole educational system is valueless because it leaves our intuitive brain out, which is where values are found. So first we have to admit in what deep water we are in. And, when I see history unfolding in the daily news, I wonder so often about judges and law schools. Are they learning values? Or is it just kind of like a game to outsmart and outspend and out profit others? And then just through all our professional school, that which of them have courses on values? And so that's one place to look, is in what we call education. And again, what I did, because I was teaching in a public high school, was to create this set of what I call the 10 C's, which are values. And then we'd get the kids to talk about them and argue about them, and where they see the virtue of courage, or of community, or of celebration, or of creativity. All these, the 10 C's, I call them. But it was a fine way. They memorized these things because they were playing with them. And when we had a reunion once, I remember them gathering, about 25 came, and they were arguing still about the 10 C's. They had memorized. These were part of their life now. And so tell them to take these 3 of these C's you want to do and create a movie out of it, or a project out of it, you see. So that way they integrated their own interest in doing a movie with a value system that was articulated by elders, if you will. And again, it was not religious. We avoided religious language. But my point is that we have to bring value values into parenting. That's a big part of parenting. But parents know they're up against all these other forces. There's just social media and school, and peers and all this, where their kids are bumping into many other value systems. So, but I think that's a lot of it, is how we choose. And of course, there's a wonderful marriage where parents and children have to communicate about values. And that alone can, and of course, generations, values evolve. I know when my parents' generation in the 30s, I remember when I heard stories about them, that dance was really important and jazz was really important for them. And it definitely, when I heard them tell the story, I could see it between the lines. It was a way of kind of turning their back on their parents' version of dancing, jazz or something like that. So my point is, some values are more flexible than others. But, and of course, now a lot of people even organized religion, but as Deepak Chopra points out, there are a lot fewer people going to church, but it doesn't mean that there's less evil in the world. Things are not necessarily better after people quit church. So the point is that where do we learn our values? Well, we used to say, well, church. But you can't say that today when 5% of young adults say they're not religious, but they are spiritual. Okay. Then, of course, meditation is a value. Calming the reptilian brain, I think, is an absolute essential requirement for our survival as a species, because that's what meditation does. It calms the reptilian brain. But it takes practice. It takes a little effort. And, of course, there are many kinds of meditation, including what I talked about earlier, art is meditation, creativity. But the point is that we have these techniques in our inherited memory, our ancestral memory of meditation of so many kinds. And today we're gifted because we have a table full. We have Buddhist meditation and Hindu meditation and Taoist meditation and African meditation. I mean, it's a smorgasbord. It's a banquet. So there's no excuse now. But it has to be a value to calm that reptilian brain. And we should talk in that language. That's scientific language. I was at a gathering of scientists for a week a few summers ago on an island, actually, talking about climate change. And one of them asked me, he was from Pakistan, so I presume he was Muslim. He said, well, what is prayer anyway. And I said, well, what is meditation anyway? I said, it's calming the reptilian brain. He was in the front row, and he jumped up and turned to all the other sides. Did you hear that? That's the best definition of meditation I've ever heard in my life. Calming the reptilian brain. Yes, it is. And how do I know that? Because I'm not good at bonding. They're very good at solitude, lying alone in the sun. And that's what a monk is. Mas means solitude, is the Latin word for monk. And so everyone can solitude. In that practice of solitude, you calm the reptilian brain. Nice crocodile, nice crocodile. Then you're ready to let that mammal brain, which is the compassionate brain, work. But if it's being sat on by a reptilian brain that is 250 years older than it is, then it's not going to flourish. And especially in a patriarchal culture where patriarchy itself defines its success as being a good reptile, being number one. Now, here's another way to calm the reptilian brain. Do you mind my talking about this? I think this is important.
No, go ahead. We've got probably about 5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes. Okay, I'll be as quick as I can. Sports are a marvelous device that all human communities have devised to calm the reptilian brain. It plays with the reptilian brain. So basketball, you've got a court or a parameter. You can't get outside lines. You got umpires. You got rules. You got a time clock. Okay, but then go at it like reptiles. Be the best you can be. Win. And that's what sport is, playing with the reptilian brain. People cheer and shout and get excited and ecstatic, and then the losers get sad for a day or two. But the point is, it's a brilliant way of not allowing the reptilian brain to overtake our culture, but rather to celebrate it, play at it, and in some ways even mocking it. It's almost ironic that we have the imagination as humans to put that reptilian brain on display, and it's fun, and it's a ritual, and energy flow, excellence happens because people have to do, and then it's over. Now we should think more seriously about the value of sport from that it is another way of calming the reptilian brain.
That's a great antidote to the opposite, which is the media, which panders to the reptilian brain, I think, and the instant gratification that children today, So I want to, before we close, I do want to quickly, at the end of your letter to the new seekers, you wrote the concepts we form and practice today create the foundation for the cultural and spiritual growth of the future. We need to achieve more than a simple desire to live in harmony if we are to survive. You talk about your wish list for, if you had a wish list, if you could create a wish list to give for a new spiritual and religious consciousness that would contribute to the survival of Earth and other creatures, it would include what?
I feel like
and we will close on this because we've got about 2 minutes.
My list is, yes. Well, calming the reptilian brain, meditating on new cosmology. That is so exciting and important to all young people. What world do we live in? And, all tribes are kept together by the creation stories. That's why the Bible begins with not one, but several creation stories. And then it keeps adding more all the way through Jewish history, including the Christian history. Marry the divine feminine sacred maxim. We've talked about that. Practice deep ecumenism, to draw from the wisdom of all the world religions. What a moment we're in that we can do that. It's the first time we've ever, as a species, had that as an opportunity right in our fingertips. Look for wisdom everywhere, but it's not about jumping from your own roots. It's about honoring your own roots and demanding more of your own roots. Many Westerners who've gone east, for example, and then returned west, have returned smarter and wiser people, but they're looking for wisdom that they found elsewhere, and they recognize the commonality of human wisdom, compassion, for example. And what the Dalai Lama says, the number one obstacle to faith is a bad relationship with one's own faith tradition. In other words, you can get so stuck in a frozen notion of what your religion is about that you don't even understand it. Become mystics, become prophets, become shamans. Thomas Berry says that the world doesn't need more professors or no more priests. It needs more shamans. And that's a very powerful observation by a very smart man, a very prophetic
It
man.
is a powerful observation, and I'm afraid it's the one that we're going to have to finish on. But it is a great one to finish on.
Yes, I think it is.
Matthew Fox, thank you so much for joining us today. I wish we had more time.
Thank you, Sandie. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Wise question.
Matthew Fox, Essential Writings on Creation Spirituality, is published by Orbis Books. For more information about all things Matthew Fox, including his articles, speaking appearances, and meditations, visit the two websites, matthewfox.org and Daily Meditations with matthewfox.org. And if you're interested in reinventing education, do check out his book, The OR Project, Reinventing Education, Reinventing the Human. That brings us to the end of this week's show. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'll be back at the same time next week with another edition of What is Going On. Till then, it's goodbye from me.